Okay.
Right.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call the February 26, 2025 meeting of the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission to order. Please stand for pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have a quorum, correct? All right, and I'd like to welcome Mayor Campbell from Town of Madison. We're glad to have you with us. Thank you. And Vice Mayor Seal from Town of Orange. Thank you for being here. And Mr. Bates, who I understand you've been here before.
I have.
So you were serving as the alternate's alternate.
I am the alternate's alternate today. That's cool.
We're so happy to have you here.
And Supervisor Nickel from Orange County is sort of in the same, maybe not as formal in terms of being a named alternate. But
Well, we are happy to have you as well. Thank you for being here today. All right, we have an agenda in front of us. I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions? If not, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Public comment. We open up for public comment. Hearing none from the public, we're seeing any indication. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. We'll have our first presentation from Mr. James about the General Assembly.
You've got the jail for 40 minutes.
we got two presentations, Ellen. So.
You got half that.
Oh,
We got a
good.
handout coming around.
Well,
too.
actually, I could yield time to Good afternoon. It's good to see everybody, folks I know and folks I don't. For those of you who don't, my name is Eldon James. I currently live in Richmond, Virginia, but when I started doing this with many of the folks or folks here or the predecessors of folks here, I lived in King George County. And have worked with the jurisdictions in this PDC since the 1996 General Assembly session. And so I wear a couple of hats. One, I do the contract lobby work for the jurisdictions of this PDC, but I also wear another hat that intersects here, and I do the contract staff work for the Rappahannock River Basin Commission, which was established in 1998. And as I like to say, you're now talking to the entire staff of the Rappahannock River Basin Commission. The commission operates on a budget of about $30,000, $15,000 of local money to the 15 members, and $15,000 in the General Assembly. 4 commission meetings a year to talk between local elected officials and state elected officials about water resources issues, which often leads to legislative ideas, hence the linkage. So I give you a little bit of background on that. I've been around here for a while and been working local government issues. Before I did this, I was county administrator in King George. And before that, I was a planning director. And then before that, I was a Parks and Recreation director in King George. So I've done quite a few different things, but I understand the challenge of local government in dealing with our General Assembly. And we have to get reminded frequently that local governments are just political subdivisions of the Commonwealth. And sometimes legislators want us to be sure we know our place. But we still have to work together and push back sometimes. And there's some legislation this year that would have been challenging, and we're going to talk about a little bit of that in a few minutes. Everybody received a handout today that gives some perspective on some key bills. There was a lot of legislation, 2,500 pieces of legislation. When we get through with the governor doing his work, about 800 to 1,000 of those will get signed into law. So things will happen July 1 that will be different than June 30th. The CAOs of this group received a report on Monday. It was a little different take, it was a little quicker. We highlighted some key bills, and then this goes a little bit farther. This is meant to be a takeaway. I am not going to walk you through all of this. You have a little key at the bottom that tells when you see something that says status, it explains what that means. If bills failed, and we tried to make some bad local government bills fail, like there were some solar bills that would have taken away local authority and rested it back with the state. All those bills were defeated, thank goodness. It doesn't mean they won't, because we were dealing with them last year, we were dealing with them the year before, we're gonna deal with them again next year. So, and I have a quote for you later on, I'm gonna express that a little more historically. So all the bad solar bills went away. That's a good thing. Fauquier County got a nice little bill, getting yourself some additional authority on dealing with illegal ag fill. Because ag fill is legal if it's properly done. But dealing with a long time headache that you all have had, and part of what has helped is your headache has grown beyond Fauquier.
Yes.
And so you had some legislators suddenly realize, maybe we're gonna get something to this. You also had legislation on data centers. The first bill on that list is one that gives, on the handout you have today, gives some additional authority to local governments to ask for additional information and consider it. It's permissive, doesn't require you to do it, but it says, well, let me qualify that. If a data center is going to be located within 500 feet of a school or a residential area, it requires a sound study. Outside of that, you have additional authority to look at natural resources, historic resources, ag and forest resources, if you wish. You don't have to. The other requirement is that you can require of the electric utility to provide you information on the amount of electricity that's going to be needed, and our substations going to be. Today, you don't have the authority to ask your electric co-op or Dominion or whomever that. We'll see if the governor signs that. Governor set a record last year in vetoing bills sent to him by the Democrat majority in the House and the Senate. I don't know whether he'll break that record this year, but he might be close. So you'll see in the status, you'll see passed, you'll see failed, you'll see pending signature. What does that mean? That means the bills have passed both houses, but they haven't been signed by the Speaker and the President of the Senate. That has to occur before they move to the posture of being sent to the governor. And that can take 3 days. I don't even know the buildings in that story. And then the governor has until midnight on March 24th to act on all the bills sent to him from the General Assembly session. The General Assembly will be back October 2nd, Wednesday, for reconvene session to do 3 things. 1, to consider trying to override any governor vetoes. That's not going to happen. It takes 2/3 majority of both chambers to do that. Last year, there was one bill that came close, and that was giving local governments the authority to hold a referendum for a 1% sales tax for school construction. You had quite a few rural Republicans vote with the Democrats to override the government. Wasn't enough to do it. It came close. That bill's going back to the governor this year. And that bill was passed with bipartisan numbers this year. Because all it does is give local government the authority to ask their voters, can we do this? The bill does not raise a tax. So that's an important bill that's there. That bill is also embedded in the budget, which makes it a little more complicated for the governor. He can veto the bill. Governor has the right to line item veto within the budget. Well, if it's a nice clear line item, that's easy. But if the line item is tied up in other K-12 funding or other capital items, does he want to strike the whole thing, including some things that the governor may very much want? So the legislature, being a little crafty, as all Virginia legislatures are, because they want every governor, doesn't matter party, They want the governor to know we're here for the long run. We're on, as they say in Richmond, the B team. We're gonna be here when you're gone, Mr. Governor, because governor's only here 40 years. And Virginia's structured that way because the General Assembly is the long-term policymaker in the Commonwealth. And best you not forget it. Okay. The other thing that the General Assembly does when it comes back on the second, considers vetoes, considers the budget and the budget line items. That was the second thing I mentioned. The third is the governor can send down amendments. So he can take a bill and say, I think you ought to consider rewriting it this way. Amendments are considered by the Assembly as an up or down simple majority vote. So if it's a House bill, it goes back to the House first. And if the House says, okay, we accept the amendment, then it's got to go to the Senate. The Senate say, no, we don't accept it. The amendments then did. Okay, goes back to the governor. Governor's got another 30 days, but the governor has a binary choice: sign it or veto it. There is no in between at that point. Pardon me doing the little civics lesson, but it's not a simple process to get from the end of the General Assembly to the final end of whether bills become law or not. And much can go on, as with Rappahannock County trying to work on their K through 12 funding issues. They're now making an appeal to the governor, and you'll go through that process. And the governor would then have to put forward an amendment to the budget, which is an up or down vote. So if you end up with a party line situation, you end up losing again, unless you can change
At least it makes that
a couple votes. You know, but okay. I'm happy. Okay, I'm not gonna go much longer. I highlighted your bill. I highlighted the solar bills. And some of the original solar proposals were pretty egregious. They're going to create a state body that could overrule your local zoning decisions. For every town and every city in the Commonwealth. Now, there's not been very many cities in the Commonwealth that have solar. There's not very many towns. It's mostly counties. That would have been a precedent that as some of us who were working against that legislation, talking to some of the environmental organizations who wanted it passed, you may rue the day that the General Assembly says, we're now going to create a statewide body that can come back and say, yeah, your rezoning was approved and it was turned down in Madison. We're going to approve it over your vote. You do that with solar, what's next? I mean, you can fill in the blank yourself. So we ended up winning the day because the conservation environmental organizations, more of them ended up coming the way of local governments who were speaking against that legislation. And I'll just say that, how you feel about the PEC? But the PEC was an ally in that fight this year, and they were an important ally. Because they have years of different legislators than some of us who work for small to mid-sized rural counties. Okay, if you've got a particular bill or something you want to ask about, I'm like happy to try to answer. I even brought the budget bill if you really want to dig down and ask me a detailed question on that. Okay, I don't want to tread too much on the bill's time.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to know your thoughts, if you read the tea leaves on whether or not, or are the solar siting bills or mandates or minimums, are they gaining traction? Do they do better this year than last year? Do you think that if it keeps going next year, we might?
I worry about next year, but this time last year, I worried about this year.
Okay.
If the elections go the way they could go, and you have a one-party trifecta in Richmond, we could have a little more to worry about. But then again, we got enough votes out of both sides of the aisle to defeat that last bill that I thought had a chance of being passed. It wasn't as bad as the ones I described, but it was very prescriptive. It said, you're going to have to go through a special exception process, and here are all the things you as a local government are going to have to do to approve that project. And would make it harder to turn it down. Many of us who worked on these issues were so focused on the bill that was gonna literally the whole local authority to Richmond, that bill got out of the House. We defeated it in, Senate, committee in the last days. And, it was a close vote. So there will be more. I myself am going to be meeting, and the chairman of County Cities and Towns carried that bill. Delegate Candy Mundon King from Dumfries. And I spoke with her on the last day of session. I'm going to be meeting with her next month to present the solar report that the Rappahannock Basin Commission did, to talk about, here are the things that you should be considering when you consider solar. One of which is, don't step on the local authority for the host siting agreements, because more solar projects have been approved in the Commonwealth under that statute than any of the others. And it was unclear whether her bill would prevent that one from being utilized. So that's the case that I'm going to be making to her. You may actually work against your purposes. So, long answer to your short question.
No,
I'm sorry.
I was expecting that. On, totally different topic, the regulation of proper negotiations at a state level. It took a big swing, 10, 15 years ago.
2016.
Yeah, and then came back a little bit.
Well, that was because the builders, the developers allowed the builders to take the lead. The builders wrote too stringent restrictions on the ability of localities to negotiate with the developers. Suddenly, projects were getting denied that could have gotten to yes if you could have negotiated. And developers were, well, wait a minute, we don't have any lots available because we can't get rezoned. And the developers put pressures back on the builders to back off. And 2 years later, it was rolled back somewhat.
Do you see that going any further?
Not at this time.
Okay.
There was a bill that the builders were behind that I was afraid was going to go that same path, and it went away. So I won't go into the details of that one. But I think that was a hard lesson. Because up until that point, the development community and the building community, who are different, were in lockstep. And suddenly the development community couldn't get rezonings done in Hampton Roads, couldn't get rezonings done in this part of the state, because people said, okay, the answer is no.
Yeah.
Because you had full authority to say no. But the whole proper system came out of Fairfax County in the 70s in order to get projects to yes. And when you took away the flexibility to negotiate, you couldn't get to yes.
Yeah, I met with a builder yesterday, developer, who he was offering some cash for schools and fire and rescue, et cetera. But it was a fairly small number, and I asked him how he arrived at that number, and he said, "Well, just using the formulas that the state has mandated, et cetera." And he said that he wasn't allowed to use any other logic. And so I said, for me, there's not enough money in here to make it happen. It doesn't pay.
And it's important that each jurisdiction has the ability to make those decisions.
Yeah. And
All right, are there any other questions? Yes,
I'd
sir.
like to catch up with you at the end of the meeting,
Sure.
talk about, I think I've seen in a Weaver letter last week, where he was for a bill that was going to require data centers to generate their own electric services.
Well, there was,
Catch up at the end so we don't hold everybody else up.
okay, there
I
was
got 4 data
legislation
centers in my area.
there was legislation to require, and there is legislation to, there was legislation to require the Corporation Commission to look at, do they need to change the rate structure, difference between data centers and others, that failed.
Just a quick check in on the budget. So the sort of consensus is 3,000 or 3% raises for state supported
That was embedded in last year's budget for both years.
And then 1,000 bonus for teachers. Anything else that we ought to be aware of that's sort of not,
Well, they
No.
put some additional money in for emergency dispatchers.
that's right, there's another
And there's
one-time
some
for
money
them.
for some constitutional officer positions.
Okay,
But those were statewide money. How the comp board is gonna parcel that out, I don't know.
that's the limit of, there's no other weird.
The big thing was $223 million to ease off the support cap.
Right.
I mean, that was the big
Support cap's a
ticket.
big one.
Now, it's presented as it removes it. There's not enough money in there that it really is removing it, but it is such a big improvement over where we've been for the last decade. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
That's all right. I appreciate your input and your wise thoughts. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Ms. Edwards.
Is there a clicker?
There is, yeah. This is the one.
And Mr. James, just so you know, you still had 2 minutes left on your time.
I yield that. I'll get even with her in a room. Technical meeting.
Okay, so we recently put out our report on our regional heat island analysis. If you don't have a copy, does anybody want a copy that doesn't have one? It's also available on our website. Do you need one? So this was published in December. Do I need to turn it on?
Yeah, probably so.
Okay.
And that always helps.
There we go. Okay, so what an urban heat island is areas of urban land use where observed temperatures were greater than 95 degrees or greater. That's what our study termed an urban heat island, and these are based on USGS studies and whatnot. They are created by concentrated areas of impervious cover. So can that go down at all so you can see the bottom of the slide or not? Can you minimize it? Lovely, thank you. So this kind of gives you a visual of what that actually looks like. You know, trees cool the air by creating shade and releasing water vapor through their leaves versus more urban areas, even parking lots in rural areas. The dark surfaces like roads, parking lots, etc., release more heat. Also, cars, air conditioners, all of that produces heat. Also, buildings trap heat in them. So these are your impervious surfaces. So why does that matter? Urban heat islands have negative impacts on heat-related illnesses and mortality, especially for your elderly populations, children, people with asthma or other health conditions. They are going to be severely impacted with heat-related illnesses. Energy costs for air conditioning, for example, those go up in urban heat islands. Air pollution levels and also water quality and aquatic organisms as your streams heat up, you have algal blooms, and it affects your water and people that fish should certainly care about that. So how did we go about doing this analysis? We used citizen science. We had volunteers with Friends of the Rappahannock. They put out the call for volunteers and helped us select sampling sites and coordinated the volunteers on July 21st, from 3 to 4 p.m. So we picked one day, 1 hour, where volunteers went out and recorded air temperatures. This is very low cost kind of project where they had a thermometer, they held it up in the air and they took the temperature at regular intervals on 22 sites. They took 314 samples across the region. And then we here at the commission analyzed that data and mapped it in GIS. And all of this was done through a Virginia Department of Forestry grant. So thank you, DOF. Okay, my clicker is not. if it's, can you just press the, thank you.
You just tell me when to quit.
I will just tell you that's probably better. Okay, so what were the results to all this? So the forecasted temperature on July 21st was 89 to 91 degrees Fahrenheit. This, I will say, this was not the big heat wave we had this summer. It was just a regular July day. It was probably a couple weeks after the heat wave. The low temperature was 81.68 degrees at Riverside Preserve in the shade next to the Rappahannock River in Fauquier County. The high temperature at 160, over 106 degrees was at Waverly Yale Elementary School in Madison County. And I will say that John is going to go through some of the maps that he created for this study. All of the hot spots are not like where you would expect them to be necessarily, like at the Walmart or something like that. A lot of them were at, you know, your elementary schools. Things like playgrounds were hot spots. So I was out at Yale, I was out at the park downtown, and the temperature on the basketball court was much less than the temperature at the playground. There were kids in the park. None of them were playing on the playground because it was too darn hot. That rubber mulch holds more heat than a parking lot does. There's no trees around the playground. So you really have to think about these things, like what are people experiencing in their communities and how does it affect them? Even being we're not in the middle of New York City, but 160 degrees is pretty down hot for children. Okay, so the predicted temperature for the entire region based on the model. So 314 temperature readings does not necessarily, we didn't walk every square foot of the region, obviously. So we needed a model, a USGS model that John put the data into, and that's what produced the GIS maps. So the predicted temperature for the region ranged from 81 degrees roughly to 105 degrees based on the model, with the average land surface temperature at 91. Yeah.
Oops.
And I'm gonna turn this over to you, actually.
Oh,
Did
is that
work strange.
clicker one?
It's temperamental.
All right, well, I'm a technical person, so we'll have a lot of. Perfect. Good afternoon, hi. Yes, we, basically, the sample sites were put
You can
into,
probably pass this one. They
Uh,
were- Yeah.
yeah,
just
this,
pass-
do I
We'll
do
go to
left
the
or
real
right?
result.
Or
This was our draft,
Yeah.
and this is where we.
not? Okay,
ended up.
so the following are gonna be essentially 5 different maps showing the 5 different counties of the region. Excuse me, the urban heat islands, those red spots, those are sites that have land use classification of urban or built up, and they had a temperature of 95 degrees or greater. The other heat islands that you see out in the rural areas are non-urban land use, so it could be any kind of agricultural, what have you, that had temperatures above the average of that day, 92 degrees, so between 92 and 94.99. So you have heat islands versus the urban heat islands. Culpeper County, the town of Culpeper kind of expected the red spots to show up where they showed up. You've got the retail corridor there to the north and east, and then various other urban areas like, you know, parking lots like the Safeway, things like that throughout the town. The county, that 29 kind of corridor, you can see there's red spots there where Eastern View High School is, the sports fields, going into Brandy Station and the airport, and then there's a couple of them going down 3, fewer than I thought there'd be, but it was based on land use classification and the temperature reading. So move on to the next.
Oh, wait, so
Oops,
the
hold on.
hottest, talk about that, yeah, the hottest.
Oh,
The high temperature was at the county.
Yeah.
Sports complex,
That
so it's
nice-
a municipal property that we could potentially put trees on to reduce the.
Is that artificial turf or?
no, it's just a lot of open space with
There's a
very
lot
little
of
shade
parking
because
lots, yeah. it's
soccer
weird.
and football require treeless locations, I guess. I don't know. It's been a while since I played. I haven't seen a tree on a football field even when I did. I mean,
Do a
you know,
pilot program, see how that works.
There's a
sure,
grant.
I did, we'll play like there in the 50-yard line. Okay, so yeah, you can see there, we had a high at the sports complex. And then Michelle was able to take the low temperature that day 86 degrees in Yellow Meadow Park, I presume in the shade, on a nice quiet trail, kids running by her with their dogs. Okay, so go to Fauquier, please. Fauquier County, slightly a little bit less urban heat island effect that day. We have, if you zoom in on Warrenton there, you'll see, well, not zoom in, but the inset map. Warrenton, that's the Warrenton shopping complex up there, like where all that development is. That was a major hotspot. And then, of course, I believe it's 211 down there by the wharf and the high school for there. And then going up towards New Baltimore, you'll see some urban activity there where we had some heat islands. The low temperature was stored at the Riverside Preserve. So where the hand is roughly there. And then the high temperature was at the Warrenton Village Center. I'm guessing in the middle of the parking lot. We also had, they did the park in Warrenton there, I guess, kind of up like from, geez, I don't think that's it, Patrick, but there is a park in there where they did, they got some high readings as well, mostly on parking lots, things like that. Next county. Madison County, not a lot of urban heat island going on there. Again, there's not a lot of land in totality that is classified as urban land use. The main part of it though, town of Madison, that area just outside of it, the wood preservers, the shopping areas, the places like that. And then going a little bit further south, those are more like urban land use. I can't remember what some of the, maybe not the word preservers, but
This would be the schools.
yeah,
the
school
food line.
complex, yep. School complex there because, hey, big open park, you know, baseballs, they don't like trees either. So Graves Mountain area, that was actually a nursery kind of slash farm there. That was the low temperature. And then the high temperature, of course, Michelle noted, was at the Waverly Yowell Elementary School. Direct sunlight on the pavement, nice hot day. You might be asking, well, it was 106, but you had the predicted temperatures of only going up to 105. The predicted temperatures were derived from data that was collected from the federal government from Landsat imagery. And it was actually the closest date I could get to the study date was the 2 days later. So the imagery that we were kind of measuring against was, 3 days newer than the actual studies. So the temperature ranges were a little bit different. Okay, next one. Orange County. Again, not a whole lot of areas classified as urban land use. You can see there, Lake of the Woods, got some hot spots. Town of Orange itself got a little bit, and then Gordonsville. And then there's the park in Barbersville, I think, had a couple of hot spots. But overall, I think that was, there's a red spot just outside of Orange on the road, right there. That's a nursery. Ironically enough, big glass building, you'd think might reflect a little heat, right? And it does. So the lowest temperature was at the Locust Grove Walmart Supercenter that day. I expected a lot higher temperature readings. I was actually out there gathering the data. My buddy and I, there's a nice grove of trees that they put in for landscaping. It was nice and shady. And I think we picked up a breeze. And so that was the low. I think we got as high as 103 or 104 on the parking lot by actually in the Walmart nursery, like the nursery section outside. So anyway. And then the high temperature was at the Barbersville Community Park out there in the western part of town. Let's go to Rappahannock. Rappahannock's really boring.
And we like it that way.
Yes. I understand that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So
Washington didn't get an park.
we basically, the town of Little Washington had some hot spots there. As you might imagine, it's more urban, more built up, actually has land that is classified as urban land use. And then around the village of Sperryville, ironically enough, the highest temperature was taken at the Thornton River Trail, which you would think it being a trail on the river. You found a hot spot, so,
There's a lot of pasture
Yeah.
in that trail.
okay. So not a lot of really, if we were looking to find tree plantings and things like that for Rappahannock County, you're looking at probably the town of Little Washington. Right there. Didn't find a whole lot out there in Shenandoah National Park, as you might imagine. But we didn't have a whole lot of, believe it or not, 72 samples. That's quite a bit for the county that size, but the folks that were in Sperryville were collecting lots of data, so. It's actually surprised we didn't get a little bit more red. Any questions? Try, okay. Yeah, don't drop it.
Yeah, any questions on the maps before we move on?
I guess the only question I had was, I assume all these were taken at the same time of day throughout?
Yes,
3 to 4 p.m.
yeah, this basically with this kind of study, you pick your day, you tell all your volunteers between this time and this time, do your collection, stop when you're done.
And usually
Come back.
3 to 4 is the hottest period of the day.
3 to 4,
Yeah.
4 to 5, I mean, I think
Yeah,
3 to
We're
4 is,
trying to pick a day with less cloud cover. Because definitely clouds and wind can impact the temperature for
Yeah,
sure.
we
So
were-
we had a pretty good day.
yeah, we
Yeah.
were originally gonna do it this the day previous. But on the Friday before. The Friday of the study weekend, the weather was looking very ominous. For both Friday and Saturday, we had to make a last minute call. Do we do it Sunday? Or do we just push it 1 week down the road? We took the chance, we said, well, there's no telling that the people will be available next week. I mean, we lost a couple of teams anyway, they just last minute cancellations. So we went that Sunday. It turns out that was a good idea because the next weekend it was, I think, 78 to 80 degrees were the highs, and that was not because of rain. It was just got a cool front.
Was this done all over the state?
No, it was just our
No, this
region.
was just our region. We had the DOF grant to do it. So we kind of replicated a study that was done at George Washington Regional Commission that they did with Friends of the Rappahannock. So we copied a lot of their methodology.
Why?
The detail of the map looked like it was very granular, but you only had 300 sites out of these 6 counties or something like that, so.
It was modeling data. So we took the
Okay.
data
And
and
then
put it into
modeled
the
relative.
Yeah,
USGS
I mean,
model. And yeah.
you saw that first map real briefly before we slammed through it. There we go. You can see very large pixels, very just ugly stuff. If you look down in the southeast part of the county, there's like green that's not like the other green. That's no data. So I had to go back in there and solve for the no data pixels, and this is all Landsat and
Yeah.
federally derived data there. You can see the points, which were our study locations, or actually the individual readings. So
Yeah,
had to
that
go
was-
in there, and then I tightened the resolution by, instead of doing the entire region in one fell swoop and then zooming in on like the town of Culpeper with huge pixels, I did it county by county against the larger model, but it still produced a tighter resolution and was easier to pick out actual urban hotspots. It matched up better against the land use, land cover data that we were modeling against it, and that's federal data as well.
Yeah, go back. So, what next? What do you do with this? Certainly areas where there's hotspots on municipal properties. Things like tree planting, as you can see there, that's tree planting done at, oh gosh, Glen Park, I believe. Culpeper County has certainly done a really good job working with Andy on tree plantings. Friends of the Rappahannock has funds oftentimes, DOF, for tree plantings. So typically it's no cost to the locality other than the staff time. And volunteers as well help with that type of thing. Impervious surface removal projects like at the Carver Center, that's that picture at Culpeper County. There's options for green or cool roofs in the guide. There's a picture of a site in Charlottesville where they installed a really beautiful green roof on a building. Solar parking lot canopies, water features, all those things can cool the environment. And we're not certainly talking about planting trees in football fields. There's still on Culpeper Sports Complex, for example, there's lots of opportunities to plant trees around, the parking lots or parking lot islands or around the sports fields. As a mom of a kid who played sports, I would love to see more trees, bringing those things while you're watching your child play instead of sweltering in the heat. Planning for green space and trees through zoning, tree preservation ordinances, purchase of development rights programs, green building incentives. There's a lot of planning things that can be done in order to create more green spaces in your community. Also, I'll say that we here at RRRC, Friends of the Rappahannock, Soil and Water Conservation Districts are all able to provide technical assistance, grant writing to make these type of projects happen. Also raising public awareness on things like planting trees, so private property can do some of these things as well. There's lots of opportunities. There's tree sales that the Soil and Water Conservation Districts always have to provide free trees to people, but just raising public awareness on some of these things. We have a homeowner's guide for the region on watershed friendly backyard that has a lot of information on doing things like this on homeowners property. There's lots of funding that is available for even pollinator gardens and things of that nature that can greatly defray the costs for these for your residents. So funding sources again are DOF grants. Soil and Water Conservation Districts have the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program. It's not just for private property. Local governments can access those funds as well, and some of your local governments I know have. DEQ's Stormwater Local Assistance Funds grants for larger stormwater projects, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, small watershed grants, and the Green Street, Green Jobs, Green Towns grants. And all of these programs in the actual report are linked, so staff can easily just click on it and get to any of these grant programs, and we're here to help as well. Future study potential, when we discuss this with the land use and the folks at the Land Use and Environment Committee meetings, the stakeholders, including some of the local staff, expressed interest in repeating this study either on an annual basis to track temperature increases over time, or to do a more concentrated study in one of the major towns in the region to produce a more robust data set. As John mentioned, we had a bit of trouble getting volunteers. So it is a little pixelated still, even for the towns, and more reliance on model data. So you could, if you did it just for one town, you'd be able to concentrate your volunteers just in that town, whether, you know, Warrenton or Culpeper or what have you, wherever, to try to get a better sense and a more robust data set. Also, weather station data. I know Gary had commented on using weather station data to improve the study. That was something that we found out we weren't able to do for this study, but if we were to do it again, we would incorporate that to try to be able to do that. It was just outside of the bounds of what we were capable of with this. But that was it.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
That's really interesting to learn about that, and I will go talk to Patrick at the end, tell him stop being such a deep source. Next thing that we have is consent agenda with minutes, applications, for grants and, strategic plan and revenues and expenditures. Ladies and gentlemen, what we do is we do this as a consent agenda. If you have, I guess what I'll do is a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions about any of the items on the consent agenda? If not, then I ask for a vote. All those in favor of approving, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Mr. Bonnie.
Yep, I'll be pretty brief with my director's report. Want to echo what the chair said in welcoming Mayor Campbell, Vice Mayor Seal from the town of Orange. Mr. Bates is here on behalf of David Lee from Culpeper County, who's the Culpeper County Supervisor appointment. He's actually been to a couple of meetings at the end of last year, so he'll be a familiar face when he is here in April. And we're awaiting, the two appointments that we're waiting on is, the town of Gordonsville and, second appointment from Culpeper County with the recent, county administrative transition. He's on virtually, with us, but we have hired a new food system specialist, Joseph Peralta. He comes to us from, most recently in New York State, but has a degree from the University of Florida and has, I think he's already been to 3 of the counties. He started mid last month, and with all of the snow and everything, that's been a challenge, but he was in Rappahannock yesterday, was in Fauquier, if not last week, but the week before, and has met with all of the nutrition directors. So monthly tastings and demonstrations at the schools will certainly amp up the rest of the year. And it was sort of, there was some conversation before the meeting, federal sort of funding cuts and uncertainty. We have internally had multiple conversations among staff and then with our federal and state partners. We haven't had any, detrimental impacts thus far in terms of, payments being withheld or anything like that. I mean, there were some emails that came out saying, USDA pausing, or NIFWF, I guess, that was pausing reimbursements, but those have since ceased. We're just like all of you, I imagine, and all of your staffs are continuing to track that as it impacts us moving forward. There's a meeting here tomorrow with a lot of the mobility management and regional transportation collaborative partners that are just talking about sort of initial thoughts on, any mitigation strategies that might be implemented for their program and some of the funding there, but nothing that we've seen thus far in terms of detrimental to this year's budget or next year's either. Only other two other things I'll mention is one, the point in time count. Foothills Housing Network did complete the point in time count in January. Want to thank the local staff that helped through most of your social services departments and other nonprofits involved in housing and homelessness assistance that helped complete that. Data will be probably, I don't know if it'll be ready for April, but certainly in June to share with all of you more. And one other follow-up from December on housing was we talked about a housing conference or a housing summit that is still in the planning stages, but the group that we have convened to talk through that initially said, let's push this off until next March. And being a procrastinator, I said, that's fine. So if that's what works for the group, then we will look at next March rather than a fall 2025 timeframe. So still more to come on that. And I think that's it. The only other last thing I'll say is on our hazard mitigation plan, we're still waiting comments from FEMA and BDEM. We have submitted that. We do have some comments from DCR on the resiliency portion, but we'll be reconvening that project management team to review those and make any changes to that. But with disasters and things that FEMA and BDEM have been dealing with, I think this is probably one that's just kind of sitting and waiting for attention. And then last thing included in with the report is just the twice annual financial account summary of all of our financial accounts. I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has them. The high level is that things remain in a good place. I will say we have seen some months this year where the year over year shows a deficit. That's largely just due to some grant reimbursements that were slow to come from Department of Rail and Public Transportation, but also spending down some monies, especially related to the mobility management program that we have booked from the PATH Foundation since they pay up front. So, but the overall picture remains very good for now. I don't have any answer questions on any of that.
Mr. Money, the last thing I would ever consider you is being a procrastinator. So
You've been chair for 2 years, huh?
I know, I haven't seen it yet. Either my blindness or yours.
Well, maybe I don't mind pushing things off. Maybe that's not procrastinating.
There you go. All right, next thing is old business. We can go down this rabbit hole for a long time, but I'd like to go ahead and if we can just carve out 10 minutes and to have and then we can determine whether we want to continue after that. But I thought I'd carve out 10 minutes for a discussion about regional broadband project status. is really open up to the group. We may not even need 10 minutes.
We continue to watch Culpeper.
I can summarize it real quick. Frustrating.
You all still with Brightspeed?
No, all
All
points.
points.
All points, I mean, sorry.
And we are actively discussing what our options are. Just to say we're not happy is an understatement. It's been very disappointing. And, you know, at times I've said, well, if this were in the private sector, this would have never happened. And I'll stick by my statement because, you know, when you're dealing with a contract in the millions and millions of dollars, you have this thing called a performance bond or something of liquidated damages that ensures that you're going to get what you paid for.
Yeah.
And that never happened at the start, and voila, here we are. So.
I did notice a lot of fiber being pulled between 20 and 3. Who is that?
That's not all points. But where they're working right now, primarily, I think, is off of the Riva Road. There's some in the I didn't bring up my sheet, but what you're seeing going down 522,
No.
that's not it.
Any other discussion?
We're getting
We're
close
in
to
the
5,000.
Yeah, if Ted and Jonathan talk, will just make us depressed.
I didn't want to have enemies. I love this group. So.
We're on the frustrated team.
All right, new business, water supply planning grant application.
All right, so this is, as the memo says, we talked about water supply planning off and on for a couple of years. Since the amendments have been proposed and then eventually were codified back in October of 2024. There was a kickoff meeting held two weeks ago tomorrow at the Culpeper Field House with DEQ staff. Several of you in the room were there. Really just kind of giving a high level, here's what's going to be required, here's what code reads and what the statute reads. The two pieces that came out of that was one that they had hinted at that they will have a grant program opening up for the little bit of money that is in the current fiscal year budget and the next fiscal year budget. 462,000 total. There are 26 regional planning units, of which our 5 counties are one single regional planning unit. And so if you do the math there, it works out to about $8,500 to $8,800 per planning unit for each fiscal year. So they have opened up that grant application program. It's actually pretty clear in the application. There can only be one applicant per regional planning unit. It doesn't have to be a PDC, it could be a local government. But I think the conversation around this table, and certainly from staff's perspective, has been it makes sense for us to serve as that applicant. The other piece that I would say is pretty much everybody that I've talked to, either at that meeting, prior to the meeting, or after that meeting, has said, if you're gonna do it, that's great, because we don't really want to. And the one comment actually from Paul Howard with Culpeper County, when he called on Monday to talk about it, was that enough money? And the answer was no, it's not enough money to do it, but it's enough money to get us started and to try to come up with a plan for achieving this over the next really 4.5 years. The other piece, and so that's the request today, is for you all to, approve and authorize us to submit that grant application to serve as the RPU Regional Planning Unit Coordinator. The other piece, and this was one that I don't think got as much attention, if it was even mentioned at the kickoff meeting, but there is a requirement for each local government within the RPU to submit a resolution to DEQ saying they support that single applicant in this process. And so there's a template template resolution that they've included in this, and that's included in your packets and also is online. Let's see if I can pull that up. And so they request that to be completed no later than June 1st, 2025. And there's the template resolution. And so I put that in front of you all, because that would be something that you all have to look at locally. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding from DEQ in terms of how fast some of these things can go, especially when it's a resolution and not just a email that says, yes, we're supportive of this. But that would be something that you all would have to do, and that we would then coordinate receiving all those resolutions. So assuming there's a positive vote here in the next few minutes, for us to submit that application, I would then, seek to work with you all and your clerks and your boards and councils to make that happen. Because I think the process of even identifying representatives from each of those localities is it's not a simple thing. So those are the pieces there. I'm happy to sort of answer questions if there are any, either from that first kickoff meeting. I didn't include it in the packet, but we'll certainly, in a follow-up email after the meeting, we'll share the slides that were shared at that meeting on the 13th. They weren't, I don't know if they were posted yet to the DEQ website. We got them by email, I guess, last week later after this one.
I guess the first question I would have is that what are you hoping to accomplish with this $8,800? Is this a planning?
Learn what you don't know.
Yeah, so the and the way it's structured is the first year, which is this current fiscal year, which ends June 30th, obviously. They are planning to do those as a pay up front, and then within 90 days, the recipient has to say, here's what we did with these funds. So if we receive them in June, sometime in the first quarter of FY26, we will say, here are the things that we accomplished. Really, and then the next year would be reimbursement based. Really, what we're going to accomplish with those things is the initial research into and maybe initially updating some of the data that's required to be updated, and that would be not only the water supply and water sources, but identifying water users and what the usage rate is. Because this isn't due until 2029, I think there's a little bit of and I think Eldon left, but one of the other pieces that's been talked about is the need to, during next year's General Assembly, or when the governor's developing his budget, is to grow that amount that's available for this grant program, because if not, that likely would then become a harder conversation around this table, and us probably having to make a request for, some sort of cost sharing with local governments.
Okay.
Michelle?
The other thing I'll note is that DEQ said during this meeting that they are going to be releasing model data and some other data that they've collected, spreadsheets and whatnot, but that's not going to be available until this summer.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean,
There's not a lot that frankly can be
there's
done
only
other
so
than.
we can do, before we see DEQ's data that they're producing, and in 30 days, how much can we really do, but we can certainly go through and collect existing data from local governments and go through the materials from DEQ and make a plan for what we're gonna do then in the future.
All right. Any other questions?
For clarity, the $8,000 is allocated towards staff time, or are you hiring a consultant, or?
And so I think, and both of those are eligible. I think our initial thought would be initially staff time, because we're not really gonna be able to get a consultant to do much for 8,000 anyways. And I think that goes towards one of the things, I don't know if I hinted at it in my memo or not, but one of the things I think we would also be doing is sort of trying to get a better sense of what's the total cost of this gonna be over the 5 years. And then, if the grant money grows, then you've got an opportunity.
Have we done one of those before, 5 years ago, or?
The existing 20 years ago, when the code was put in place, when the statute was put in place, they left it up to localities to say, you can do this as a region, which some did. This region did not. So each county and its towns within each have their own plan. It did sound like, and those of you that were there, correct me if you heard differently, it did sound like, compiling those things, those existing plans and trying to find out where they are is going to be a large chunk of this. There's no requirement to identify where we're going to put a reservoir in the region or anything along those lines. It's very much, meet the statute codes, and then there are some things as the region that we'll have to identify, such as what are alternative options that might be available. The ones that are in the plan as priorities are not there. So there are 5 existing plans rather than 1.
What I got out of it is updating and combining the existing plans, and then have some public input, which we weren't required to do
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago, whenever we did the last one.
Yeah, I think the only new things are regional risks and regional alternatives are the only new things, in addition to more focus on public input, like you said. Otherwise, it's the same requirements that were in the local plans.
All right, we have Requested action to approve the RRRC staff to complete and submit application to DEQ 2025 local and regional water supply planning grants program. Funding and for executive director to execute contract documents upon successful award. Do I have a motion to, thank you, second? Second. Thank you. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Question, Mr. Chair. The application is March,
Yes.
but the resolution
It's June.
of support.
It's not a resolution of support, it's more of a, let me get the language. Right.
Well, you're designated as the lead for the applicant, which is confusion. You would think it would be,
After.
Right.
yeah.
The deadline.
So it's basically saying that you're going to contribute to the study or whatever the effort is
Right.
as a locality.
The
That's what the
inconsistency is
resolution is.
consistent with the rollout of this program.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the template resolution, what it says is now therefore be resolved that local government agrees to participate with all local governments and water authorities within the RPU.
We don't have to do it before you apply.
No, I think I think the June 1st deadline might be related to when they want to get the funding out. But I would be shocked if they said, oh, we don't have all 13 local governments in your region and 2 water authorities, resolutions in, so we're just not gonna do it.
There's 12/13 of the month.
And they have to be submitted by June 1st. All right, next.
So the next one is the Regional Housing Development Program grant. And this is, if you recall, in December, we presented on the status of the 4 years of the PDC Housing Development Program and the 5 partners that we have, successfully and, getting closer to the end of each of those projects. And we also shared that Virginia Housing has brought that program back, with some, few less funding, so 8 million across the state instead of the 40 million that it was funded at 4 years ago. And competitive rather than based on population per region. So there's 8 million, it's competitive. We do have a partner that we've spoken with, and that's Fauquier Habitat for Humanity, who feels that they can complete the program or the project that they've proposed, which is related to their 35 Corner Street project, which 4 years ago or 3 years ago, when we first had, or 4 years ago, when we first had proposals come in, this was the one that they proposed. This is a building that they do own that they want to turn into 18 affordable housing units, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units within that building. So really what staff is asking for, and our recommendation is we had conversations with Encompass about their project in Orange. We had conversations with Heroes Bridge about their project, and neither felt that they could commit to what was needed. Fauquier Habitat does feel that they can commit to that and can commit to completing or expending money by June 30, 2027. So what we're asking for is approval to continue to work with them to develop this application. The deadline for the application is next Thursday, the 6th. And again, it would be competitive. And in this case, I would say if it was awarded, I think the requested action includes that same language of executing contract documents. I do think this would be one, if it was awarded, we would come back to you all and talk through in more detail what Fauquier Habitat plans and just ensuring that we're safeguarded, because this is a little bit different than the previous grant. So that's happy to answer questions on what they're proposing or the program in general.
All right, we have to be quick about this. We may have till next Thursday to get an approval. We approve staff to complete and submit the application in collaboration with Fauquier Habitat for Humanity. Can I have a motion to approve this action?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Question? If not, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
We want to next one?
Oh, yeah, building resilient infrastructure. We're going on a roll.
So
now.
this one is even, the time frame is the same in terms of the application deadline. Myself was approached by Rappahannock-Rapidan Cooperative 2 weeks ago about a potential application to the BRIC program, which is administered by VEDA and FEMA, related to hazard mitigation and conducting some of the mitigation work. So you might remember we're right in the middle of our hazard mitigation plan update towards the end of it. But REC, they indicate their interest is, funds to support replacing some of their wooden utility poles primarily in the national park and in areas adjacent to the national park. With iron poles, and they state that this is a project that would be a wildfire mitigation project. Reducing the, making the infrastructure more resilient, but also making the infrastructure stronger, and less likely to, snap in high winds, things of that nature. As the memo says, the pre-application deadline is March 6th. This is another one where I think we would be okay submitting, by then. The pre-application is not terribly, onerous in terms of the information provided. But again, this would be one where, if there was further action to be taken and potentially an award, we'd want to come back to you all because, setting up the contract, I would want to make sure that REC is aware if there's a requirement for, cost overruns, things of that nature. But I guess as a conceptual idea, that's really what I'm bringing to you all. If it makes sense for the commission to serve in that applicant role for a utility partner. As I understand it from my conversation with BDEM, REC couldn't apply for this themselves. They're not an eligible applicant, so it would have to be either a local government or a regional body.
Resiliency sounds great. Some folks in that area have concerns about view shed.
Yes.
And so I think a pre-application is wonderful, so we could learn more about what it looks like.
I'd be curious to see what the poles look like.
Yep.
Yeah, especially since they're gonna be going right through Sperryville probably.
Is this the same or different?
Totally.
Totally different.
We have requested action to consider, it's a pre-application, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would also say if there are the questions that were just raised are helpful for me for taking back to REC to be able to say we need more information, or if it's a pre-application right now, I wouldn't want to commit ourselves to something that goes beyond that.
All right, well, can we change the language to say consider pre-application?
You all can do whatever you want, please.
Then I would,
Authorized staff was in the same language as last one.
it says consider application. I would propose changing it to consider pre-application to the Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities Program. I'll make that motion with that amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I understand it's pre-application to get more information, but whatever they can share in advance, if that's contact this week, hey, we're gonna apply, but we'd like to know your route of the infrastructure, monopole, colors, all that fun stuff that would definitely concern us.
And I will share that I did ask for, we have, I guess what they would call a project abstract, which is a couple of paragraphs. I did ask for a map of the area. I have not received that as of right now. And so I think all those are things that
And visuals are always helpful.
sort of lead me in the direction where you.
Our massive wildfires that we had a couple years ago were not officially caused by REC infrastructure, but were caused by REC infrastructure failing and power lines going down in heavy winds and dry conditions and causing fires all over the place. So it's a great opportunity.
I think the other question don't have an answer to this one yet, but I don't know if their intent is to do this anyways, and they're just looking for funding to offset it, or if it's more speculative. And so I think that's something I would bring back to you all as well.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right. Do we have any reason for a closed session? Nope. All right, we'll go around to the regional roundtable. I'm going to have to leave. I have to pick up my grandson from his school, which is my school so I have to leave here at 2:30. So if I leave part of the way through, I apologize. What we do at this point, we'll go around the table for the new members. Mr. Bates, you have the unenviable position of being the first to speak. So tell us what's going on in Culpeper County.
Well, as we said earlier, broadband is a hot topic, trying to get that completed. I guess one of the problems, or I shouldn't say problems, but challenges that Culpeper has been working to solve is we're such a great county that everybody wants to move there. So how do we direct that growth while preserving rural character and farmland? I know some of our neighbors, you all are going through the same thing. We've been kicking around some ideas on tools in the toolbox to preserve open space and farmland, and one of those was time-based subdivision, which we all know has been challenged, and I think there's only 3 or 4 counties in the Commonwealth now that still use time-based, so we're working on maybe a collaborative effort between adjoining counties. I've talked to Michael Weber about submitting a bill in the next year that would have language that would allow for time-based subdivision or other tools that would help preserve farmland while directing the growth. Again, I could spend all afternoon talking about that, but I know the town right now, you guys are going through some rezoning ideas, and it's just, I guess it's just growing pains 101. And but I've been a big supporter of, if we don't protect our open space and farmland, once it's gone forever. So we're working on a budget right now. It's going to be a challenge this year. The pennies from heaven, for lack of a better term, in the past are over. The growth that we've experienced has put us in a position where we need about a $70 million renovation on a middle school. We're building our 7th elementary school. And I for one feel that by the time we get this elementary school, open the doors up, we're going to be ready for the 8th elementary school. Our sheriff's department is being run ragged because of one of the factors is Clevenger's Corner. They're every night having to send deputies, So all of these things are byproducts of, I'm not going to use the word, I guess I am, this excessive growth. And until we get a handle on that, I feel for my constituents, you're just going to have to grab your wallet because that's what's coming. So
That's led to some yard signs that I've seen.
well, and that was an initiative that we had, and this being my 2nd term on the board, I've learned a lot about politics. And these little yellow signs and what's being, touted doesn't mean that it's 100% factual. And that's what's so frustrating. Instead of picking up the phone and calling your supervisor and saying, hey, what's going on? Because the ones that I had explained this to, what our plans were, they're like, well, what's the uproar? What's everybody upset about? Well, you might want to call and ask the Piedmont Board of Realtors what their version is. That said, we voted in January to follow the planning commission's recommendations and do nothing for the time being. We had our first work session on the 13th. No, I'm sorry, 13th. And we're kicking some ideas around, getting some more information from surrounding counties. But it really is frustrating that if you could just get your message out there and not have it, twisted up, you'd be in good shape. So.
Thank you. Mr. Woods?
Well, so we had our election, and Harrison Clough and Delmer Silver were the 2 that were elected. Harrison Clough is mayor, and Delmer's been elected vice mayor at the first meeting we had in January. On a very sad note, American Woodmark, the largest employer in town, is closing down. We had 131 employees that lose their job. I've been told about half of those will take a retirement package. The Orange County Economic Development and the Town of Orange Economic Development and Woodmark held a job fair with I think it was about 12 vendors from around the area, and it was very well received. So I think that they may even have a second one. As far as capital projects that we got, we'll be moving into phase 2 of the standpipe project, which is the reservoir and the electrical building and the pump building. Probably in a month or 2. And about next week, we will start with our meter replacement projects, which is to replace all the meters in town. That's going to be a pretty significant job for us. What we dealt with over the last few weeks has been snow and a freezing temperature after that. And our Macon Road water tank seal busted, and we lost 750,000 gallons and almost got to the middle school. But it's all weather related. Our budgets are in process right now, and I think I've been asked before, but our current budget proposal, not approved, is 3% COLA. But I'm also asking for 2% merit to align some of our salaries that we've got. The last thing I will report is, some of you may know Debbie Kendall. She'll be joining the town of Orange, April 1st as Director of Community Development.
I did ask Supervisor Dawson, I didn't want to step on toes. He said, go at it. So it must be full faith and confidence. So we'll start off our EMS renovation project. That's nearing the close. We did get our temporary occupancy on, I think it was Monday. That's been drawn out, but we are there. So our folks have moved out of our lease station, thankfully. No more rent on that, and doing operations out of that renovated location. Our Hoover Ridge Park project, that's going to consist of eventually of a splash pad. We're taking some good lessons from the town of Culpeper. There'll be other opportunities. We'll eventually move hockey. Hockey is the only sport that's not over there. So we want to, move every sport together. Notice to proceed was given to the general contractor, and now we're waiting on them to pull all the fund permits that are required. Stormwater primarily is everyone's favorite topic. I'll go next with budget. Our budget work session starts Thursday, tomorrow at 3 o'clock. One of our first visits is the school board. So we're going to start fresh, start hard, and see where we land with that endeavor. And then most importantly, which we felt a little bit last night at the supervisors meeting, we are officially underway with our county reassessment. And it's a good opportunity. We watch social media traffic. I try not to participate other than reading comments. But a lot of folks need to be educated on the equalization part. We're not legally allowed to keep our current rates, where we're just taking in 50% more revenue. But I think that's going to work out. Our last reassessment was in 2019. So we do it every 6 years. I know some localities may or may not have their own assessor departments. We've chose to do that via contract. It's because of a rule. It seems to make more sense. What we would spend every 6 years, we would probably do that every year if we had to stand up our own department. So that's where we're at this time. But everybody's waiting on that tax rate. So I think 50 to 70% value increases in some cases. But again, look at a house, what it costs, which 2019 was based on 2018 data. Look what a house, what was it?
83%.
So we don't discriminate. I think it was 150,000 increase for the weekly household, but no. Yeah. So, but I mean, every 6 years, you go through the process, think about what a house, at that time versus now, and the interest rates were a lot different too. So it's just to be expected. We'll go through the equalization process and we'll see how we stack up with our neighbors with taxes once that's complete. So Mr. Dawson, you want to say anything?
I just realized we ain't got no problems compared to Culpeper. That's all.
Hello, good afternoon. Town of Madison has, there's two new council members, new, that the other two are 24 and 30 years in. So there's some resistance to change and some adjustments that are happening and a lot of learning at the table. So appreciate any help there. So we are nearing the end of a project grant that we have with DHCD, identifying some of the opportunities or blight or infrastructure utility, anything that we can do to help improve the town of Madison and to see where the citizens are really at within a survey. And so we are going to be having a town hall, and so that's going to be something to help with the engaging of the town, and the community members of the county are welcome as well. From that, we'll then garner some plans and look at, if there's any grant opportunities to help property owners or anything that we can do to help do that. We have some new business opportunities that are coming in that we're waiting on some site plans to come in through our project. Through our planning commission. Excited to see that happen, but nothing, concrete yet. And we're just looking at budget workshops, waiting to see how the county's going to adjust and see how the town has to change their taxes as well for that real estate. So a lot to dig into and learn my first year, but excited to be a part of it all.
So Orange County, a handful of things to share. We have a new director of development services, And she's coming at a good time because we are doing a zoning ordinance update. Board's interested in adding few additional districts to account for the fact that we have some limited development in our agricultural zones, and we don't like the idea that we still call those A zoning districts. So I think we might break it out into rural service, maybe rural residential, and try to stop having as much by right in the ag district. So that we're kind of working through that. The planning commission's got some committees, and then we'll use a consultant to help us with drafting. And that'll be for the kind of the rest of the year that we kind of work through that. And so our new director, whose name Michelle Mikesel, because we need more Michelles in the planning field in this region. And so if you see her around, welcome her. She's actually from Pennsylvania, but she went to VCU and has some Virginia consulting experience. Then she went off and lived her life a bit, and most recently is from Texas, but happy to be back on the East Coast. In that same shop, we have our building officials, and we've got some turnover there because of retirement and some other changes. And so we've reached out to Culpeper for some assistance, and we appreciate their willingness to talk to us about mutual aid while we kind of bridge over. We're making some offers to some applicants and all that, but that'll sort out shortly. And we're excited to stabilize that group for her and move forward. As far as projects go, we are moving into design for a community recreation center, similar to the Culpeper Fieldhouse, and about to evaluate proposals for the designer of our first county built purposely designed fire station. Having said that, we are also in budget, and so the ability to afford those things will be hot topics for our board to review and see if we can continue those projects or need to tap the brakes or not. We're optimistic that our revaluation will give us additional revenue. We're looking at somewhere around 36% to 40%, not quite the 60 to 70% that Madison has, but we have moved to an in-house process. We have 4 staff, and we're trying to have a tech-focused approach using imagery and we have sort of GoPro cameras on our cars, and kind of the computer does all its cool stuff to figure all that out. And so some modeling and that's where we are with that. We're ready to publish that information very shortly, and so that'll be the basis for our new tax rate. And so then, as we know, it's a 2-factor process, the rate and the value. And so where that lands is the board's challenge as we get into the budget process. One of our biggest challenges is in the staffing of public safety folks. We're pretty good in law enforcement, but we're really struggling with our paramedics. That's a problem in the region, and we all keep sort of poaching from each other. They all know when any one of us raises pay, and then they think the grass is greener, and some of them go and some of them go and come back, and some of them go and come back more than once. But we continue to work that problem. We've got our own recruit school now going with this. We were actually in the middle of our second recruit school, and it looks like we're going to have to do that and grow our own going forward, just because the broader world isn't generating enough people to work in that field, much like the medical field. It's a real challenge, but we're working on it, and we're doing some evaluations of our staffing and how we deploy. A couple of projects that are underway, but the weather has delayed. The permits have been issued to add some new hangar capacity there, airport, and they're just waiting for the weather. And then also to put in the parking and picnic pavilion at our new disc golf course. And so hopefully those will get underway here this spring. That's pretty much what I've got to do. I will say that we've reached out to Culpeper on the broadband issue to see if we can be part of their solution. And they're, thinking about that. And so if we can reach an agreement, we'll see what we can do to help. Thanks. And Supervisor Nickel, anything you'd like to throw in there?
No, you got it.
All right,
thank
thank you,
you.
sir.
We had a great election in the town of Remington, and you guys get to tolerate me another 2 years. Really got a really good, strong council as a result of the last election cycle, so we've got a whole lot of stuff on our plate. It's in perpetual motion, every one of them. Nothing goes fast or fast enough. So I'll be brief and just go down the list. You've known some of these for the 4 years prior. Swim Club is under deconstruction. Thank you, Fauquier County. We're moving forward in that regard. We got 5 acres that we need to play with and figure out what everything's gonna come out about it. The depot has been relocated. It is now under construction. The inside and the outside, the materials has been just terrible to get a hold of. But that's moving forward. I think it'll be done either late spring or early summer. JM15 revitalization. We have a program plan that's being developed by engineering firm. I look for us to get that sometime next month. And that will allow us to do phasing of JM15 revitalization and split up in phases so that we can manage it as we grow north and south of the town. River access is still dealing with that, trying to get river accesses on the Hazel River and the Rappahannock River about 5 miles upriver so that everybody's floating to us instead of away from us. That's key. Storm drainage study, which is being managed by US ACE. We have a meeting scheduled the 5th to get insight as to what is the estimated cost and the schedule time in order to do that study. So I'm excited. The hurricane in North Carolina got in the way. FEMA has not been able to be scheduled for meetings. US ACE hasn't been able to be scheduled for meetings. So hopefully we'll get through this March 5th meeting and move forward. I'm really excited about a Dollar General store coming in. Everybody in the community is one of the supermarkets. And I have visited the smaller stores, Lidl and Aldi, and we don't meet the demographics to get them interested. Dollar General is the nearest thing that I can get in respect to a supermarket. It's the largest footprint that they offer. And that size footprint supposedly handles fresh meat and fresh vegetables, so that will help our community. The important part about this is it also is driving the necessity for a natural border adjustment so that we can bring that store into the town limits. Thanks, Fauquier County, you're helping me out there again. But everybody's really excited about that opportunity. So a lot of stuff going on. It's taking me full-time plus half.
So, in Fauquier County, we have, like everybody, the budget is looming large. We don't have a reassessment this year, so the increase that we're going to need to put in place will be very visible. And the question is whether we're going to be at around inflation or slightly more than inflation or slightly less than inflation, but it'll be something. We have an $80 million school project that starts this year. We have been transitioning our fire and rescue from volunteer to paid staff, increased by 40 or 50 full-time folks over the last couple of 3 years. And so those adjustments, we have to pay for those things, of course. we have recognized that some of our departments have salary deficiencies. We're gonna try and make up some of that. We have been asked very nicely by the judges to build in some new facilities. And we're anticipating, we kicked that off recently, looking at revamping virtually all the county-owned facilities in the town of Warrenton. And so probably gonna see $100 million budget that we know we have to fund in the next few years to start the judicial center, jail, magistrate's office, you know, all of those, sheriff's office, all of it is gonna have to be rebuilt. We also know we have some big water issues, talking about regional water planning. The estimates are 44 million for the new Baltimore water system. That's primarily for just the contaminants, filtering out of PFAS and forever chemicals. There's talk about maybe a cheaper solution being linking us to Prince William County and getting some of their water, both because it may be treated before it gets to us. It might be cheaper than maintaining our own water systems. Then we also have the drought of the last couple of summers. Our groundwater, from which we get virtually all the water in the county, is not replenished. We're below today. We're below where we were a year ago in those groundwater measurements, and so just planning ahead, we may be telling folks this summer that they can't water their lawns or wash their cars and things like that if they're on municipal systems. Looking ahead, we have, if anybody's followed this, we had a big, a 1,000-acre roughly solar proposal, utility scale solar, just south of the Midland Airport. And it was shot down for the second time at the Planning Commission last week. And so we're very interested in legislation that's governing whether or not these things are going to be mandated, or we're going to have somebody else telling us what we can and can't do. You know, my read on it is that it isn't a question of if, it's a question of when we're going to be required to have these things. And so I think we're going to have taken another look at that solar proposal. But the one that was proposed was a gem in terms of the amount of money they were paying, the promises they're making. They were going to farm I'm not going to say past tense. The plan is, their proposal would be to farm continuously, sheep farming under the panels. And at the end of the 40 years, the farmer who has been doing the work will be able to purchase that land for $1, 1,000 acres. A guy who would never in his lifetime be able to afford to own his own farm would have that opportunity. He's a young farmer, and at the end of the 40 years, they remove all the panels and put the farm in easement perpetuity. So it would be a farm forever. But at the moment, the sentiment is not behind it. So we have some work to do there. I think coming up, you know, the real aha, as Eldon mentioned, we had a bill, it's a tiny little thing that on dirt, on ag fill, illegal ag fill, that allowed us to increase fines and decrease the timeline for appeals. So it increases, you know, our threat to be able to stop these folks a tiny bit. But these are folks that are earning, you know, $10,000 to $50,000 a day. So our little fines and threats are not going to be much unless we get some much more hefty fine capacity, or heck, let's throw these guys in jail or something. I don't know. We need something more. So I think this process has alerted me to the need for all of us to be doing some of these things on a more regional scale and do them much earlier in the legislative year. I will say we as a county worked with Eldon for years. All before my time. In our first year, we switched over to a new lobbyist firm. They've done, I was very impressed with them. I think going forward, we will move up our legislative calendar and really try and get some of these things, and certainly increasing our ability to protect ourselves from these ag fill folks. These are, data centers being built in Northern Virginia. They'll literally, some farms will see 300-400 trucks a day dumping dirt for days and days and days with no permits, just dumping. There's nothing you can do to stop them. And the farmer is gonna earn $100,000 or better for letting them do this. So it's hard to get them to say no. We are gonna need to have a lot of legislative work on transmission lines, solar siting, the whole discussion about proffers. I think that what has happened, as Eldon mentioned, for 15 years or so, 10 years at least, we've just all been saying no because we can't negotiate reasonable proffers. And this developer I met with the other day said that he does projects in Maryland. He said, yeah, I know that if it's a townhouse, I'm gonna write a check for $40,000 for the schools. I said, I'm okay with that. Just tell me what I need to pay you and I'll do it. And it's a level playing field for all builders, but at this point, it's all cloak and dagger and so you just have to say no to everything. So I think we need some improvement on that. And I noted in one of the bills, a discussion about regional planning for power generation and efficiency. And so it's just floating out there. Is that something that we are contemplating?
Well, the energy, the bills that included the regional energy planning requirement did not pass. I think they would likely come back.
So one of I read said that there is already a regional planning requirement and that the bill was related to that, but you're saying that it does not.
If we're talking about the same one,
Yeah.
the way it was initially written, the way that the Commission on Energy and Utility Regulation, that CURE group down and that it has Delegate Weber and Robin Chain and among others on it. The way it was initially written, they wanted to tie it to each PDC's like regional strategic plan. The way it was eventually in the bill that was defeated was a standalone plan that, could contribute because frankly, most of the PDCs don't have a single plan, and we have a collection of plans that sort of make up our strategy and our vision for what we want to do. So I think that may be what we're talking about is the semantics there, but the bill didn't end up going forward or didn't include the regional energy planning piece. But if it was, the way it was couched was, I think it was a $4 million budget amendment that would go in to say, then we'll pay the PDCs to do this. And that was sort of okay, but if you're mandated, you have to do it. But I think that as of right now, we don't have anything that requires it. We certainly could consider energy planning as part of that, but again, that comes to funding and how we want to do it.
Right. That's all I got. Thank you.
And just for point of order, Mr. Voorhees is the vice chair, so he is now running the meeting.
Nice.
As he knows.
Well done.
Very soft.
Blew your cover. Thank you.
Just two quick things. Airport RFP is going to be going out for building of hangars. So that's one. And then second is that we're going through a systems conversion for all of our financial systems. It's 11 months, so a very quick timeline. Munis.
Good luck.
So, yep, I know. We did payroll and HR in 2014. So yeah, but those are the two things. And if we want to talk later about legislative group, we can do that. If that's something a desire of this committee.
And I don't have anything, Mr. Wood covered it all.
I was just gonna say that we're fighting the good fight, keeping heat islands at bay.
Thank you.
Working hard at that every
All your
day.
cool air blows our way, so we appreciate it.
A lot of courthouse stuff. The capital costs landed at the board last night, and so they're deciding how they can do it with somebody else's money or something. They don't really like the idea of doing it, but I think they're gonna do something. So we gotta figure out what that something is.
You know what your final number is?
Oh, we're probably 25 million or something like that for a little thing, but that's way too big for us. Too big of a building, too big of a dollar amount.
That'd be like us getting 200 million or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I say we can do it. It's just the community doesn't understand that that's possible and thinks it's just ridiculous.
Is that a separate building or?
Separate building. We did go through the process and the board came to the conclusion that we're gonna do a separate building and not try to add on to the 1830 Fort Courthouse. That it's just absolutely surrounded by
We're
every
gonna
county
be building
utility.
a house, all of your courts?
Yes,
Yeah.
well, we have one courtroom now, and they're working on a bold decision to possibly move to two. So.
The spare.
Yeah, exactly. It's time, but when you go from, what did we decide? Ours is about 4,000 square feet now
Yeah, it's tiny.
to, potentially 10.
We have a lot of features right now where the inmates get to mingle with the judges and the witnesses and the
We do.
jury on the same stairway, so.
We have all those.
We have
Yeah.
that.
We have 4 of those.
Right.
I was the foreman on a murder trial and it is definitely intense when the guy walks by you that you know could have done something really bad. Definitely. So yeah, that's gonna be the fun of this year, but I think the board is wise enough to know that we've been putting this off since 1980. And we really, prices aren't getting cheaper and so gotta do something.
Yeah, what was the dollar per square foot in 1980?
Yeah, I think we should look that up.
Downey and Scott out of Warrenton decided ours was around $700 a square foot right now.
Right now. Yes, please hold. The only thing I have to add is we do have a retention recruitment coordinator on the EMS side that we got a grant through.
Safer.
Safer. This is her second year on the job and she is doing classes in our high school. Right now, emergency medical responder, and I don't know how many students she's got. She's probably got about 12. But for Rappahannock County, 12 kids coming out that I can actually help in an emergency situation is great. And I know the rumor talk is that we may end up having an EMR first semester and EMT second semester next year. So that we, have a bunch of kids. Now, everybody says, but they'll leave the county immediately because they'll be able to get jobs elsewhere. But I do believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll let you know when they graduate.
Close enough.
They have to drive through our county to get to you, so I think we got first dibs.
Yeah. But I think it's a great program and the kids really seem to like it and there's an excitement there. And we do something called an aftermath at the high school to simulate a car accident from prom night. And it's well developed to the point that the kids get to play the roles and they're made up to look bad. And the fire and rescue companies all come in and play a part. And the helicopter folks come out. And so it really is, the sheriff's office is involved, everybody's involved, it's very intense. And we have a person that's in our dispatch that lived through a situation with her sister many years ago. And she gives a talk afterwards and it's pretty intense, but really does give you a feel for if you misbehave and cause an accident, what can happen. So that's all I have.
All right. So in Culpeper, I would say snow and supply chain has been the bane of my existence, trying to get construction projects completed this winter, but we just got one completed yesterday and the other 2 are bridge project and our wastewater project. We're probably a couple of months out to get those completed, but we probably lost a month, if not 2 months this winter because of those projects. It is an equalization year for us this year. We're gonna a reassessment year. We are going to recommend equalization from 6.6 cents to 6.1 cents to council. I assume they'll probably accept that. Other than that, we've had have done a real good job with smart scale projects. PDOT's treated us well. We have the McDivitt Route 3 roundabout project that has been designed, advertised and awarded, so that'll get going. In the next round, we got 3 projects, 1 roundabout, 2 sidewalk projects. And this last round, we applied for 3. We got 1 roundabout project that at least the staff has recommended, waiting on CTB approval for that. And Culpeper County also had one of those that's in the same bucket. I say that because that gives us 6 projects based on VDOT calculation of monies about, they say $90 million. If we didn't have VDOT involved, we could probably do it for 30 million, but that's a different story. But Sam and I have been working with VDOT to see if we can bundle those projects. Take, advantage of economies of scale, push the projects up, try to get them done quicker, just because we're such good guys and want to help save the state some money, but we'll see how that goes. But we can bundle those together. I think it will save the state a bunch of money, and maybe we'll get them done before I retire, but we'll see. Other than that, we're working full speed ahead with one data center project on our reuse water, taking our wastewater effluent, turning it into cooling water. We've now got that up to about a $10-11 million project. We keep adding stuff to it since they're paying the bill. But that seems to be going pretty well. And then we're working with another data center project where we may be the retail supplier of power to that. So we're trying to work through all of those issues and figure out how we can provide power to somebody that each building uses more power than the town of Culpeper uses. So trying to make sure we're protected, because if they don't pay their bill, that could bankrupt the town. So we're going to make sure they have monies we can draw from if we're going to do that and things of that nature. But or we may not, and we may relinquish the territory to Dominion and REC. We'll see. But that's kind of what we're doing at this time.
Very good. New, interesting problems. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Does anybody else along the wall have anything they would like to add to the good of the order? Well, thank you everyone for all those great updates. The officers are signing the bank forms. I did my duty to sign the forms, so now apparently I'm on the hook for fraud or something. If
You signed up on like a new mortgage or
careful,
something.
yeah, I don't know. So hopefully I'll live through that.
That is a good.
No,
that is
no
a good-
front royal IDA.
Yeah, no front-
Talk to Doug.
Yeah, believe me, I read what I was signing. Sure did. A motion to adjourn,
So moved.
second. All those in favor? Adjourn.
Thank you.